I'm Samantha Reynolds, 37, and I'll never forget watching my son Ethan's eyes fill with tears as my sister Miranda handed him a glass of water. Her own children, Tyler and Sophia, were devouring buttery lobster tails right in front of him. When I asked about his dinner, Miranda's lips curled into that familiar smirk. "We don't feed extras," she said with a dismissive shrug. My parents looked away, pretending not to hear. In that moment, standing in Miranda's extravagant kitchen, something inside me finally snapped. This wasn't just another family dinner. This was the last time my sister would ever treat my son like he didn't matter. Before I dive into this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe to join our community of real-life storytellers. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for what happens next. Sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones sharing our own blood. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Boston, Miranda and I shared a bedroom but little else. Just 2 years older than me, Miranda was always the golden child in our family. She had the better grades, the prettier dresses, and most importantly, our parents' undivided attention. I still remember my 10th birthday when my parents forgot to buy a cake because they were busy preparing for Miranda's dance recital. It became a pattern I grew accustomed to. My achievements acknowledged with distracted nods, while Miranda's smallest accomplishments were celebrated with enthusiastic praise. Our parents, Robert and Diane Wilson, never tried to hide their favoritism. "Miranda just needs more support," my mother would explain whenever I questioned the disparity in their treatment. "She's more sensitive than you." In reality, I was the sensitive one, but I learned to hide it because vulnerability in our house belonged exclusively to Miranda. College was my first taste of freedom. While Miranda attended an expensive private university with our parents covering every expense from tuition to her downtown apartment, I cobbled together scholarships and worked 2 part-time jobs to afford state school. I chose elementary education, driven by a genuine love for teaching and connecting with children. Miranda pursued business administration because, as she put it, that's where the money is. After graduation, I threw myself into teaching. There's something magical about guiding young minds, watching their faces light up when they finally understand a difficult concept. I was building a life I was proud of, even if my parents showed little interest in my classroom achievements or the lives I was helping shape. Meanwhile, Miranda landed a marketing position at a prestigious firm and quickly caught the attention of Richard Blackwell, the wealthy CEO of a real estate development company. Their whirlwind romance culminated in an extravagant wedding that my parents nearly bankrupted themselves to fund. I served as bridesmaid, smiling through gritted teeth as my father gave a toast celebrating how Miranda had always been destined for greatness. My own life took a quieter but no less meaningful turn when I met David Reynolds, a construction manager with a kind smile and steady presence that grounded me. David understood family complications. His own relationships were strained by divorced parents who still used him as a pawn in their ongoing conflicts. We bonded over creating the supportive family neither of us had growing up. When we married in a simple ceremony at a local park, Miranda made sure to comment on how quaint everything was, while my parents fretted about what their friends would think. The birth of our son Ethan was the greatest joy of our lives. He came into the world with curious eyes and a fighting spirit we would come to rely on. At 3, he was diagnosed with asthma that required expensive medication and occasional hospital stays. David and I managed cutting corners where we could and putting Ethan's health above everything else. Life had been particularly challenging in recent months. The construction company David worked for had lost a major contract, resulting in layoffs that swept through the company. David, despite his seniority, wasn't spared. For 6 months he'd been applying for positions across the city, each rejection chipping away at his confidence despite his impressive experience and references. Our savings were dwindling quickly. Between Ethan's medications and our mortgage, we were approaching a financial cliff I couldn't bear to look over. It was David who suggested reaching out to my family. "Just to get us through until I find work," he said. "Family helps family." I knew better, but desperation has a way of breeding hope where none should exist. That's how we found ourselves driving to Miranda and Richard's waterfront mansion for a family dinner. The house was a modernist showcase of glass and steel perched on a cliff overlooking the Atlantic. Their twin children, Tyler and Sophia, ages 10 and 12, had separate wings of the house with amenities that would make luxury hotels envious. Meanwhile, Ethan shared his bedroom with storage boxes of teaching supplies I couldn't fit elsewhere in our modest 3-bedroom home. "Remember to be polite," I instructed Ethan as we approached the imposing front door. "And don't touch anything that looks expensive." My son nodded solemnly. At 8 years old, he already understood class differences better than most adults. "Will Grandma and Grandpa be happy to see me?" he asked, his voice small. "Of course they will," I lied, knowing my parents typically spent the first hour fawning over their other grandchildren before acknowledging Ethan's existence. As Richard opened the door with a stiff smile, I forced optimism into my voice. "This dinner will be fine," I whispered to David. "Maybe things have changed." But as Miranda appeared behind her husband surveying us with barely concealed disdain, I already knew I was wrong. Miranda's house smelled of wealth. That particular blend of expensive candles, polished hardwood, and the subtle scent of privilege that can't be purchased at a department store. Richard led us through their cavernous foyer into a dining room that could have comfortably seated 20. Tonight it was set for 7, Miranda, Richard, their children, my parents, and Miranda herself. I noticed immediately that there was no place setting for Ethan. "Oh," Miranda said, following my gaze. "I didn't realize you were bringing him." She gestured vaguely toward Ethan as if he were an unexpected pet rather than her nephew. "I mentioned on the phone that we'd all be coming," I replied, keeping my voice level despite the familiar anger rising in my chest. "Did you? I must have forgotten." Miranda turned to her housekeeper, who was arranging flowers nearby. "Rosa, please add another place at the table." She paused, looking at Ethan with a tight smile. "Just a small plate will do." My parents arrived moments later, greeting Miranda with enthusiastic hugs before offering David and me perfunctory embraces. My father crouched to Ethan's level at least and ruffled his hair. "There's my little sportsman. Are you still playing baseball?" The fact that Ethan had been passionate about soccer for 3 years now hung awkwardly between them. Throughout the pre-dinner drink sparkling water for me and David as we were driving, Miranda dominated the conversation with stories about Tyler and Sophia's achievements. Tyler had been selected for an exclusive science program. Sophia had placed first in a regional piano competition. My parents nodded and exclaimed at all the right moments. "And how is your teaching going, Samantha?" my mother eventually asked during a rare lull. Before I could answer, Miranda interjected, "I heard that public school budget cuts are devastating. I imagine they'll be laying off teachers soon." She gave me a look of manufactured sympathy. "You really should have chosen a more stable career path." "Actually," I countered, "I just received excellent performance reviews and we're expanding our literacy program next year." "How nice," Miranda replied dismissively. "Richard, tell Dad about your new development project." When dinner was finally announced, we moved to the dining table where Miranda directed everyone to their seats. My parents flanked Tyler and Sophia with Richard at the head, and Miranda at the foot. David, Ethan, and I were positioned on one side, clustered together like an afterthought. Rosa and another server brought out the first course, an elaborately plated seafood appetizer with delicate scallops and caviar. Everyone received a portion except for Ethan, who instead got a small bowl of plain broth. "Miranda," I said quietly, "there seems to be a mistake with Ethan's meal." "Oh, I just assumed he wouldn't eat this," she replied loudly. "Most children have such simple palates. Isn't that right, Ethan?" She didn't wait for him to respond before turning to her own children. "Tyler, tell Grandma about your science project." I glanced at Ethan, whose eyes were fixed on his cousin's plate. David squeezed my knee under the table, a silent reminder to stay calm. Richard, to his credit, looked uncomfortable but said nothing. The main course arrived with theatrical flourish. Servers presenting covered silver platters before simultaneously revealing butter-poached lobster tails with truffle risotto. Again, every plate was identical except for Ethan's, which contained a small portion of plain pasta. "Miranda," I said more firmly this time, "Ethan would like lobster too." "Oh, I didn't order enough," she replied without looking up from her plate. "We weren't expecting extras." "He's not an extra," I said, my voice tight. "He's your nephew." "Well," she sighed dramatically, "children typically don't appreciate fine food anyway. Tyler and Sophia are exceptions, of course. They've been raised with sophisticated tastes." Tyler chose that moment to loudly complain that his lobster wasn't as big as his sister's. Sophia responded by sticking out her tongue. "So much for sophisticated tastes, Samantha." My father interjected clearly, trying to change the subject. "David, how is the job search going?" David cleared his throat. "It's been challenging, but I've got some promising leads." "I heard the construction industry is really suffering," Miranda commented, cutting into her lobster. "So many people losing their homes because they can't afford the mortgages anymore. It's just tragic." She took a delicate bite and looked pointedly at us. Ethan, who had been quietly pushing pasta around his plate, reached for his water glass and accidentally knocked it over. Water spilled across the table. "Oh dear," Miranda exclaimed with exaggerated concern. "Rosa, we need cleanup." She turned to my mother. "This is exactly why I had the carpets scotch-guarded after the twins' 7th birthday party. Children can be so destructive." Rosa quickly appeared to mop up the spill and replace Ethan's empty glass with a new one filled with water. As she set it down, Ethan looked up at her with embarrassment in his eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "No te preocupes, pequeño," Rosa replied kindly. It was the warmest interaction Ethan had received since arriving. As Rosa retreated, Tyler pointed at Ethan and laughed. "Mom, Ethan doesn't even have any real food, just water and baby pasta." Miranda smiled indulgently at her son before turning to Ethan. "We don't feed extras," she said with that smirk I'd grown to hate. "Water should be plenty for unexpected guests, don't you think?" The dining room fell silent. Even my parents looked uncomfortable now. Richard set down his fork and gave Miranda a sharp look she completely ignored. Something inside me broke. Years of swallowing my hurt, of making excuses for my family's behavior, of teaching Ethan to accept scraps of affection. It all came rushing to the surface. I stood up slowly. "Ethan is not an extra. He is my son. He is your nephew. And he deserves basic human kindness, especially from family." "Oh please," Miranda scoffed, "you're being so dramatic. I was just trying to accommodate his dietary restrictions." "What dietary restrictions?" I demanded. "Ethan doesn't have any food allergies or restrictions." "Well," Miranda faltered momentarily, "I just assumed since you've been struggling financially that he might not be used to rich food. Wouldn't want to upset his stomach." David stood beside me, his hand on my shoulder. "I think it's time we left." "Yes, perhaps that's best," Miranda agreed with false sweetness. "Clearly Samantha is too sensitive right now. Must be stress from all your difficulties." I looked at my parents, waiting for them to say something, anything, to defend their grandson. They studiously examined their plates. "Ethan, we're going home," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside. My son stood immediately, relief flooding his face. As we walked toward the door, I heard Richard say sharply to Miranda, "That was completely unnecessary." Her response floated after us. "Don't start, Richard. They came here looking for a handout, not dinner." In the car, Ethan's tears finally fell. "Why doesn't Aunt Miranda like me, Mom?" I pulled him close, my heart breaking. "This isn't about you, sweetheart. Some people are just unhappy inside and they try to make others feel small so they can feel big. I promise you," David added, starting the car, "things are going to change." As we drove away from the house on the cliff, I made a silent vow that Miranda would never hurt my son again, no matter what it took. David was still seething when we arrived home. I'd rarely seen my even-tempered husband so angry. He paced our small living room after we'd tucked Ethan into bed, his hands clenching and unclenching. "I should have said something the moment she pulled that stunt with the food," he said. "What kind of person does that to a child, to family?" "This is who Miranda has always been," I replied, exhaustion settling into my bones. "She just usually hides it better." "And your parents, they just sat there." David shook his head in disbelief. "How can they not see what she's doing?" Before I could answer, my phone rang. My father's name flashed across the screen. I put the call on speaker. "Samantha," he began without preamble, "you really embarrassed your sister tonight." David made a choking sound of disbelief. "I embarrassed her," I repeated. "Dad, she refused to feed Ethan. She called him an extra." "You're taking things too personally," he insisted. "Miranda explained everything after you left. She was just concerned about Ethan's health, and frankly, showing up expecting financial assistance and then creating a scene over dinner portions seems rather ungrateful." I froze. "What are you talking about? What financial assistance?" A pause. "The loan you were planning to ask for. Miranda told us you were coming tonight to ask for $10,000. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. "Dad, we never intended to ask for money tonight. Yes, we're having difficulties, but the dinner was supposed to be just family time. Miranda invited us, remember?" Another pause, longer this time. "That's not what she said." "Of course it isn't," I replied bitterly. "And you believed her without even asking me." "Now, Samantha." "Good night, Dad." I hung up, my hands trembling. David sat beside me, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "So she invited us just to humiliate us. She told your parents we were coming to beg for money, then treated Ethan like garbage to ensure we'd never actually ask." That's exactly what she did. The realization was like ice water in my veins. And it's probably just the beginning. My prediction proved correct the very next day. I arrived at Westfield Elementary, where I'd been teaching 4th grade for 6 years, to find several colleagues giving me strange looks. My friend and fellow teacher Alicia Parker pulled me aside before first bell. "Is everything okay at home, Sam?" she asked, concern etched across her face. "What? Yes? Why?" "It's just, your sister called the principal yesterday. She was concerned about your mental state and financial situation. She suggested it might be affecting your ability to teach." The blood drained from my face. What? Principal Jenkins didn't take it seriously, Alicia assured me quickly. "She knows you're one of our best teachers, but it's making the rounds in the teacher's lounge." I stumbled through my morning classes, maintaining my composure for my students while internally reeling from this new betrayal. During lunch, I discovered 3 missed calls from Ethan's school. When I returned the call, the school counselor informed me that a concerned family member had suggested Ethan might be experiencing neglect at home. "We conducted a standard wellness check," the counselor explained apologetically. "Ethan seems perfectly fine, of course. He spoke very highly of both you and his father." By the time I picked Ethan up that afternoon, I was simmering with rage. My son climbed into the car with slumped shoulders. "What's wrong, buddy?" I asked. "Tyler and Sophia told everyone at school that we're poor," he mumbled. "They said we might have to live in our car soon." My hands tightened on the steering wheel. "When did you see Tyler and Sophia?" "They came to my school at lunchtime. Their mom was with them. She bought pizza for my whole class, but she made a big announcement about how she was helping the less fortunate." Ethan looked up at me with confused eyes. "Are we the less fortunate, Mom?" That evening, David returned home looking shell-shocked. The promising job interview he'd been scheduled for had been mysteriously canceled. The hiring manager had been apologetic but vague about the reasons. "It's the strangest thing," David said, loosening his tie. "I did some digging afterward. Turns out the construction company is one of Richard's subsidiaries. The timing seems a little too convenient." We sat at our kitchen table piecing together the extent of Miranda's campaign against us. The dinner had just been the opening salvo. She was now actively working to destroy our reputations, our livelihoods, and even our relationship with our son. Why? David asked. What could she possibly gain from this? The answer came to me with surprising clarity. Control. And punishment for not playing by her rules. Miranda has always needed to be the successful one, the superior one. She can't stand that. Despite having less money, we're happy. We have a loving marriage and a wonderful son. In her mind, if we're struggling financially, we should be miserable and grateful for any crumbs she offers. So what do? I took a deep breath. We stop reacting and start responding. Miranda thinks she has all the power because she has money and our parents' support. But we have something she doesn't. What's that? The truth. And each other. I reached for David's hand. We're going to protect our family, but we're going to do it smart. That night, after Ethan was asleep, I created a detailed record of everything Miranda had done, from the dinner incident to the calls to our workplaces. I then sent a simple text to my sister. I know what you're doing. It stops now. Her reply came minutes later. I have no idea what you're talking about. Perhaps your financial stress is making you paranoid. I'm only trying to help. The battle lines were drawn. Miranda had wealth, influence, and our parents on her side. But she had underestimated my determination to protect my family. She'd always seen me as the weaker sister, the one who would roll over and accept her dominance. She was about to learn how wrong she was. The following weekend, I drove 2 hours to meet with our cousin Jessica Wilson at a cafe halfway between our homes. Jessica and I had been close as children until Miranda orchestrated a falling out between us during high school. The rift had never fully healed, but my message explaining the situation with Miranda had prompted an immediate response. Jessica looked much the same as I remembered. Curly hair, kind eyes, and a warm smile that now held a hint of caution. We hugged awkwardly before settling at a corner table. I've been waiting for this call for years, Jessica said, after ordering coffee. I always wondered when you'd finally see Miranda for who she really is. I think I've always known, I admitted. But I convinced myself that family loyalty meant accepting the unacceptable. Jessica nodded. That's how she operates. She makes you feel crazy for objecting to her behavior, like you're the problem. What happened between you two? You were starting that boutique business together, and then suddenly you weren't speaking. Jessica's expression darkened. We weren't just starting it together. It was my concept, my business plan, my connections. I brought Miranda in because she claimed to have investors lined up. She stirred her coffee absently. 2 weeks before launch, I discovered she'd taken my entire business plan, rebranded it slightly, and presented it to the investors as solely her idea. She locked me out of our shared email and social media accounts, and told everyone I'd tried to steal from her. My stomach dropped. That's terrible, Jess. I had no idea. Of course you didn't. Miranda made sure of that. She told the entire family I was mentally unstable and jealous of her success. Jessica sighed. The worst part was when Uncle Robert and Aunt Diane believed her without question. They didn't even ask for my side of the story. They've always enabled her, I agreed. But now she's targeting my son, and that crosses a line I can't ignore. Jessica leaned forward. I'm not the only one she's burned, Sam. Have you ever met Marcus Thompson? Richard's ex-business partner? No, but I've heard Miranda complain about him. I bet she has, Jessica said with a knowing look. He has quite a different story to tell. We should talk to him. Over the next week, I began piecing together a disturbing pattern in Miranda's behavior. Jessica put me in touch with Marcus Thompson, who revealed that Miranda had orchestrated his removal from the business partnership with Richard through a series of manipulated communications and falsified records. She wanted control of the company's direction, Marcus explained during our phone conversation, and she couldn't have that with me in the picture. I also reconnected with Alicia, who had more insight into Miranda's interference at school. She's been watching your social media obsessively, Alicia told me over lunch in the teacher's lounge. Remember when you posted about being tired after parent-teacher conferences? She called the school the very next day suggesting you were having a breakdown. The most shocking revelation came when I received an email from Barbara Jenkins, a former administrator at our school district, who had retired 3 years earlier. She had heard through the grapevine about recent events and felt compelled to share something that had bothered her for years. I never told you this, Barbara wrote, but your sister contacted me when you were being considered for the lead curriculum developer position. She expressed concerns about your ability to handle the stress and suggested that your home life was unstable. She provided what appeared to be documentation of financial mismanagement. I should have verified the information more thoroughly, but it was convincing at the time. I'm deeply sorry, Samantha. I stared at the email in disbelief. The curriculum developer position would have meant a significant promotion and salary increase, something that would have changed our financial situation substantially. I had been devastated when it went to another teacher with less experience. That evening I showed the email to David. His face hardened as he read. She's been sabotaging us for years, he said quietly. This isn't new behavior. No, it's not, I agreed. The only difference is that now she's doing it openly because she thinks we're too desperate to fight back. David shared his own discoveries. 3 job interviews had been cancelled in the past week alone, all with companies that had connections to Richard's business empire. It's like we've been blacklisted in the construction industry, he said, frustration evident in his voice. At least in this city. Ethan was also feeling the effects of Miranda's campaign. He came home from school increasingly withdrawn, eventually admitting that Tyler and Sophia were spreading rumors about our family. They told everyone we don't have food at home, he said, fighting back tears. And that Dad lost his job because he did something bad. When I called my parents to discuss the situation, they were coldly dismissive. Miranda says you've been acting erratically, my mother said. She's worried about you, Samantha. We all are. Have you considered that Miranda might not be telling the truth? I asked. Why would she lie? My father replied, genuine confusion in his voice. She has everything she could want. You're the one struggling. That night, after putting Ethan to bed, I sat at our kitchen table surrounded by notes and emails, evidence of Miranda's systematic attacks on our family. I felt a despair so profound it was physically painful. How could I fight someone who had spent years positioning herself as the trustworthy sister, while painting me as unstable and unreliable? David found me there staring blankly at the scattered papers. Without a word, he pulled me into his arms and I finally allowed myself to break down. The sobs tore from my chest, years of suppressed hurt and anger pouring out. I don't know how to protect us, I whispered when I could finally speak. She has money, influence, our parents. What do we have? David held my face between his hands, his gaze steady and determined. We have each other. We have the truth. And most importantly, we have people who know the real Miranda. You're not alone in this fight anymore, Sam. His words sparked a moment of clarity. Miranda's power had always come from isolation, making each of her victims feel alone and discredited. But what if we weren't alone anymore? We need to talk to Richard, I said suddenly. Not confront him, just talk. I have a feeling he might see more than Miranda realizes. David nodded. And I'm going to reach out to some contacts outside the city. Miranda can't have blacklisted me everywhere. For the first time since the disastrous dinner, I felt a flicker of hope. Miranda had spent years crafting her perfect image, but facades inevitably crack. All we needed to do was find those cracks and gently push. The next morning I woke with newfound determination. I created a private online document detailing every interaction with Miranda, every manipulative tactic, every lie we'd uncovered. I shared it with Jessica, Marcus, and Alicia, inviting them to add their own experiences. The document quickly grew, revealing a comprehensive pattern of calculated behavior that was impossible to dismiss as coincidence or misunderstanding. I also began documenting every interaction with my parents, noting how their responses changed depending on whether Miranda was involved. The evidence was clear. They consistently supported her version of events, even when presented with contradictory facts. "It's like they're programmed to believe her," I told David as we reviewed the document. "It's actually a bit frightening." "It's decades of conditioning," he replied. "They've built their entire worldview around Miranda being special and perfect." Acknowledging the truth would mean accepting that they've been wrong and complicit for years. As we built our case, small victories emerged. David secured an interview with a construction company in a neighboring city, one with no ties to Richard's business network. Alicia and several other teachers publicly defended me when rumors about my competence surfaced again. And Ethan, showing remarkable resilience, began standing up to his cousin's bullying. "I told Tyler that being rich doesn't make you a good person," Ethan reported proudly one afternoon, "and that having a fancy house doesn't matter if you're mean inside it." I hugged him tightly, amazed by his wisdom. "You're absolutely right, buddy. The size of your heart matters more than the size of your house." The pieces of our counter-offensive were falling into place. Now we needed the right moment to change the narrative permanently. To show everyone who Miranda truly was, not just who she pretended to be. That opportunity would come sooner than we expected, and from the most unlikely source. The call from Richard came on a Tuesday afternoon as I was grading papers. His name on my phone screen was so unexpected that I almost didn't answer. "Samantha," he began awkwardly after I picked up, "I was wondering if we could meet privately." We arranged to meet at a small coffee shop across town, far from Miranda's usual haunts. Richard arrived looking nothing like the confident businessman I was accustomed to seeing. His shoulders were slumped, dark circles shadowed his eyes, and he kept glancing nervously at the door. "Thank you for meeting me," he said, fidgeting with his coffee cup. "I wanted to apologize for everything. The dinner, what happened to David's job prospects, all of it." "You know about that?" I asked, surprised by his directness. "I suspected. Then I confirmed." He sighed heavily. "Miranda has become, I don't even know how to describe it, obsessed maybe, with controlling the narrative, with being right, with ensuring everyone sees her as the successful sister and you as the failure." "This isn't news to me, Richard." "No, I suppose it wouldn't be." He looked up, meeting my eyes directly. "But you should know it's getting worse. She's spending hours on your social media accounts, looking for anything she can use against you. She's having her assistant Lauren track David's job applications so she can interfere. She's even hired someone to follow you and document your routines." My blood ran cold. "That's stalking." "I know." He ran a hand through his hair. "I've tried talking to her, but she just accuses me of taking your side. She's convinced herself that you're trying to turn your parents against her, that you're jealous of her success." "That's absurd." "It's projection," Richard said quietly. "She's doing exactly what she accuses you of doing. The thing is, Samantha, Miranda's empire isn't what it appears to be." Richard then revealed something I hadn't expected. Their financial situation was precarious. Miranda's excessive spending and several failed business ventures had created significant debt. The waterfront house was mortgaged to the hilt, and Richard's company was struggling with cash flow issues. "She's terrified of anyone discovering the truth," he explained, "especially your parents. They think she's financially supporting them in their retirement, but in reality, I've been quietly covering those expenses from my personal savings, which are nearly depleted." The pieces clicked into place. Miranda wasn't just being cruel. She was desperately maintaining an illusion of success, while actively preventing us from improving our situation. If David and I overcame our financial challenges through honest work, her perceived superiority would evaporate. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because this has gone too far," Richard replied. Using children as pawns, destroying careers, turning family against each other. This isn't who I want to be. And frankly, I don't think it's who Miranda truly wants to be either. Something has to change. As I left the meeting with Richard, my mind was racing with possibilities. Richard hadn't explicitly offered to help us, but his willingness to share information suggested he was at a breaking point. I called David immediately. We need to expand our alliance, I told him. Starting with Lauren. Lauren Mitchell, Miranda's executive assistant, was initially hesitant to meet with me. I could lose my job, she texted, after I found her contact information through Jessica's network. You could also help prevent a family from being destroyed, I replied. No pressure, just coffee and conversation. To my surprise, Lauren agreed. Over lattes at a bookstore cafe, she revealed that working for Miranda had become increasingly difficult. She has me doing things that feel unethical, Lauren admitted. Calling companies to spread rumors about David, monitoring your social media accounts, even drafting emails to your parents that misrepresent situations. She lowered her voice. Last week she had me compile a file of evidence that you're an unfit mother. When I asked what it was for, she said it was insurance. Insurance for what? I asked, my throat tight with anxiety. Lauren shrugged helplessly. She didn't say, but it felt like a threat. By the end of our conversation, Lauren had agreed to keep me informed about Miranda's plans without actively sabotaging her employer. I can't do anything illegal or unethical, she stressed, but I can give you a heads up when something concerning is happening. With Lauren as our inside source, Marcus providing business insights, Jessica sharing historical patterns of Miranda's behavior, and Richard's tacit acknowledgement of the situation, our alliance was growing stronger. Even Alicia stepped up, rallying support among our colleagues when Miranda attempted to spread more rumors about my teaching abilities. A significant breakthrough came when David received a job offer through Marcus's connections, a position with a sustainable building company that operated completely outside Richard's sphere of influence. The salary wasn't as high as his previous job, but it offered stability and growth potential that we desperately needed. It's in the next county, David told me, excitement lighting his features for the first time in months. The commute will be longer, but Miranda can't touch it, I finished for him, understanding immediately. Ethan's situation also improved when Alicia connected us with a respiratory specialist who offered a new treatment approach for his asthma. The new medication was more effective and surprisingly less expensive than his previous prescription. He's breathing better than he has in years, I told Jessica during one of our regular strategy sessions. It's like one weight has been lifted at least. As our personal situation stabilized, we focused on documenting every interaction with Miranda. I started recording all phone calls legal in our state with one-party consent and saving every text and email. Lauren provided copies of concerning directives Miranda had given her, and Marcus shared communications that demonstrated Miranda's attempts to interfere with David's career. We're not doing this for revenge, I reminded everyone during a meeting at our home. We're doing this for protection, and hopefully, eventually for healing. Healing? Jessica asked skeptically. You think Miranda can change? I don't know, I answered honestly. But I have to believe that exposing the truth creates the possibility for something better than this endless cycle of manipulation and hurt. The alliance provided more than just strategic advantages. It offered emotional support that had been lacking throughout my life. For the first time, I wasn't facing Miranda's behavior alone or questioning my own perceptions. Others saw what I saw, experienced what I experienced, and validated the reality I'd always been told to ignore. Our first real victory came quietly. After documenting Miranda's campaign to discredit me at school, Principal Jenkins called me into her office. I received another concerning call from your sister yesterday, she said, her expression serious. But this time I recorded it. She pressed play on her computer, and Miranda's voice filled the room, dripping with false concern, as she suggested I was having mental health episodes in the classroom. I've spoken with every teacher on your grade-level team, your students' parents, and observed your classroom personally, Principal Jenkins continued after stopping the recording. There's absolutely no evidence to support these claims. In fact, you're one of our most stable and effective teachers. She slid a document across her desk. This is a formal recognition of excellence for your personnel file. I've also flagged your sister as a problematic contact whose communications should be directed straight to me in the future. I blinked back tears. Thank you. Don't thank me for doing the right thing, she replied firmly. And Samantha, whatever is happening with your family, know that your professional family has your back. As summer approached, we continued building our documentation while strengthening our support network. Miranda seemed to sense something had changed. Her attacks became less frequent but more desperate. A particularly vicious rumor about David's supposed drinking problem fell flat when not a single person who knew him believed it. An anonymous call to child services resulted in a home visit that quickly determined our family was loving and stable despite financial challenges. The balance of power was shifting almost imperceptibly at first, then with gathering momentum. Miranda had always derived her strength from isolating her targets and controlling the narrative. Our alliance had disrupted both strategies. She'll escalate before she retreats, Marcus warned during a strategy session. When manipulators feel their control slipping, they often make bigger, riskier moves. His prediction proved accurate in ways we couldn't have anticipated. The first sign of Miranda's escalation came in the form of an expensive gift delivered to our house, a gaming system Ethan had mentioned wanting during a family gathering months earlier. The accompanying card read simply, "Thinking of my favorite nephew. Love, Aunt Miranda." "We should send it back," David said immediately. I agreed, but Ethan's disappointed face gave me pause. Let me talk to him first. I sat with Ethan in his room, the unopened box between us. "Buddy, do you understand why Aunt Miranda sent this now?" He considered the question seriously, his 8-year-old brow furrowed in thought. "Because she's trying to make me like her more than you." His perception startled me. "What makes you say that?" "She does the same thing at school," he explained, matter-of-factly. "She brings Tyler and Sophia to my lunchtime and they show off their new stuff. Then they tell everyone their mom says they can come visit and get stuff too, but only if their parents are nice to her." I took a deep breath, fighting back anger. "That's called bribery, Ethan. It's when someone gives you things so they can control you or how you feel about other people." He nodded solemnly. "Like when Tyler said I could play with his drone, but only if I told everyone my dad got fired because he messed up, not because of money problems." His eyes filled with fierce loyalty. I told him no. Dad didn't mess up anything. Pride swelled in my chest. "You're a very smart, very brave kid. You know that. So we're sending it back?" "Yes. But I promise we'll find a way to get you a gaming system when the time is right, one that comes with love, not strings attached." We returned the package with a polite but firm note declining the gift. Miranda's response was immediate. A series of texts to my parents claiming I was preventing Ethan from having nice things due to my jealousy and punishing him for having a relationship with his aunt. My mother called her voice sharp with disapproval. Miranda was just trying to do something nice for Ethan. Why must you always reject her generosity? "Mom, she's trying to buy his affection to turn him against us. Can't you see that?" "The only thing I see is your persistent resentment of your sister's success," she replied. "It's not healthy, Samantha." The conversation ended with nothing resolved, but I refused to let it affect me the way similar exchanges had in the past. Our alliance had helped me recognize the patterns in these interactions. How my parents consistently reframed Miranda's manipulative behavior as generosity and my boundaries as jealousy. 2 days later, Lauren texted a warning. "M planning something with Ethan's school. Be prepared." That afternoon, I received a call from the school counselor informing me that someone had made an anonymous call to Child Protective Services alleging neglect. "We're required to follow up," the counselor explained apologetically, "but given Ethan's excellent attendance, record academic performance, and obvious well-being, we don't have any concerns. A caseworker will need to visit your home, but it's just a formality at this point." The caseworker who came to our house the following week was thorough but kind. She noted Ethan's well-stocked bedroom, our refrigerator full of healthy food, and the obvious affection in our family interactions. "I see a lot of struggling families," she told me privately before leaving. "Yours isn't one of them. Financial challenges don't equal neglect, and whoever made this report should understand that distinction." As predicted, the investigation concluded without issue, but the stress of the experience took its toll. Ethan became anxious about going to school, worried that someone was watching him and reporting back to his aunt. David struggled with anger at the invasion of our privacy and the implied attack on his ability to provide for his family. Miranda's next move targeted David directly. Rumors began circulating in his new workplace about supposed substance abuse problems, the same false narrative that had failed to gain traction among our friends. Lauren confirmed our suspicions, sharing screenshots of emails Miranda had sent to several employees at David's company from an anonymous account. "She's getting desperate," Marcus observed when we updated the alliance. "These are increasingly risky tactics that could easily be traced back to her." "But why?" Jessica asked. "What does she gain from destroying David's reputation?" "Control," Richard answered during one of his now regular check-in calls. "If David loses this job too, you'll be financially devastated. In Miranda's mind, that would force you to come to her for help on her terms." The most alarming escalation came in early November when my parents called to inform us that the traditional family Thanksgiving gathering was being reconsidered. "Miranda feels uncomfortable having Ethan around her children given your recent instability," my father explained awkwardly. "She suggested, perhaps we have separate celebrations this year." "What instability?" I demanded. "Dad, the CPS investigation found nothing because there was nothing to find. My school administration has formally recognized my teaching excellence. What evidence does Miranda have of any instability?" "Well, she mentioned you've been acting paranoid, accusing her of interfering in your life." "Because she is interfering. She's called my workplace with false concerns, reported us to child services, sent people to follow me." "See, this is exactly the kind of paranoid thinking she's concerned about," he interrupted. "People following you, really, Samantha." I took a deep breath, remembering Richard's confirmation of the surveillance. "Dad, I have evidence of everything I'm saying. Miranda is deliberately trying to isolate us from the family. Can't you at least consider that possibility?" A long pause followed. "I'll talk to your mother," he finally said. "But Miranda is very upset about all this." "I bet she is," I replied, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. After weeks of back and forth, my parents reluctantly agreed that the family should still celebrate Thanksgiving together. "But please," my mother begged, "try to keep things civil, for everyone's sake." As the holiday approached, Miranda's behavior became increasingly erratic. Lauren reported that she was obsessively tracking our social media accounts and having emotional outbursts at work. Richard confirmed that she was barely sleeping, staying up late to compose lengthy emails to family members detailing my supposed mental decline. "She knows she's losing control of the narrative," Richard said during one of our calls, "and that terrifies her more than anything." The most telling sign of Miranda's desperation came from an unexpected source. Ethan came home from school one day visibly upset. "Tyler and Sophia weren't at school today," he reported, "but Aunt Miranda was. She was talking to my teacher for a long time." A call to his teacher confirmed my fears. Miranda had shown up claiming to be concerned about Ethan's home environment and suggesting that the school might want to provide extra support given the circumstances. I was uncomfortable with the conversation, his teacher admitted. "She seemed to be fishing for problems that don't exist. Ethan is one of my best students. well-adjusted, kind to others, always prepared for class. Whatever is happening in your family, it's not negatively affecting his education. That evening, David and I sat with our alliance via video call, reviewing the escalating pattern of Miranda's behavior. She's spiraling, Alicia observed, becoming less calculating and more reactive. Which makes her more dangerous, Marcus cautioned, but also more likely to make a mistake that exposes her true nature. Jessica nodded in agreement. The Thanksgiving gathering could be the turning point. If she feels cornered, she might show her real self in front of everyone. As we prepared for what would inevitably be a tense holiday, I couldn't help feeling a mixture of dread and determination. Miranda had spent years crafting her image as the perfect, successful sister, while casting me as the struggling, unstable one. The truth was about to emerge one way or another. What none of us anticipated was just how dramatically that would happen. Thanksgiving Day dawned clear and cold. David, Ethan, and I spent the morning baking pies and preparing the side dishes we'd promised to bring to my parents' house. Despite the tension of recent weeks, there was something comforting about the familiar holiday rituals. The smell of cinnamon and nutmeg, Ethan's careful arrangement of marshmallows on the sweet potato casserole, David's terror jokes as he washed dishes. Whatever happens today, I told them as we loaded the car, remember that this, us, our family, is what matters. Not Miranda's opinion, not my parents' approval, just us. Ethan nodded seriously. And our friends, like Miss Alicia and Cousin Jessica and Mr. Marcus. Exactly, David agreed, ruffling our son's hair. The family we choose is as important as the family we're born into. My parents' house looked exactly as it always had for Thanksgiving. Fall wreaths on the doors, the dining table extended to its full length, my mother's collection of ceramic turkeys arranged on the sideboard. The familiar setting made the undercurrent of tension all the more surreal. We arrived intentionally early to help with final preparations, knowing Miranda would time her entrance for maximum impact. My mother accepted our dishes with polite thanks but seemed distracted frequently, checking her phone for updates from Miranda. The table looks beautiful, Mom, I offered, trying to ease the awkwardness. Miranda ordered a special centerpiece, she replied, adjusting the elaborate arrangement of exotic flowers and gold-painted branches. Imported flowers. Wasn't that thoughtful? I bit back a sarcastic response, reminding myself of our strategy. Remain calm, don't react to provocations, document everything. It's lovely, I said instead. Miranda's arrival 40 minutes later was exactly the production we'd expected. She swept in with Richard and the twins, all four dressed in coordinating autumn colors that probably cost more than our monthly mortgage payment. The children carried expensive-looking gift bags for my parents, while Miranda herself managed 3 boutique shopping bags and an enormous bakery box. Sorry, we're late, she announced, though they were precisely on time. The bakery took forever with our dessert order. French patisserie, she added, with a meaningful glance at my homemade pies. They only make 15 of these torts each day. My mother rushed to take the bakery box. It looks wonderful, dear. And you didn't need to bring gifts too. Just a little something, Miranda demurred. The children picked out cashmere scarves for you both. And Richard found that limited edition golf club Dad's been eyeing. My father's eyes lit up at the mention of the golf club, an item I knew cost upwards of $500. Our modest gifts, handmade bookmarks from Ethan, a photo album I'd carefully assembled of family memories, suddenly seemed inadequate by comparison. Throughout the pre-dinner drinks and appetizers, Miranda dominated the conversation with stories of the twins' achievements and Richard's business successes. She carefully directed questions to emphasize the contrast between her family's prosperity and our more modest circumstances. David, any luck with the job situation? She asked with manufactured concern. I hear the construction industry is still struggling terribly. Actually, I'm settled in at Greenfield Builders now, David replied evenly. Sustainable construction is booming even in this economy. Miranda's smile faltered momentarily. Oh, I hadn't heard. Well, entry-level positions can be a good foot in the door, I suppose. David's heading their residential division, I interjected smoothly. They specifically recruited him for his expertise in energy-efficient building systems. A flash of irritation crossed Miranda's face before she quickly pivoted. Ethan, darling, you must tell Grandma and Grandpa about the presents we sent. Wasn't that gaming system just like the one you wanted? Ethan glanced at me uncertainly. We returned it, I said, keeping my voice neutral. We explained in our note that while we appreciated the thought, we prefer to provide Ethan's larger gifts ourselves. So materialistic. Miranda sighed dramatically to my parents. I was just trying to be a loving aunt. Speaking of loving gestures, Richard said suddenly, Miranda, didn't you want to tell Samantha about that situation with Ethan's school, the misunderstanding? The look Miranda shot her husband could have frozen lava. I don't know what you're talking about, dear. Richard met her gaze steadily. The visit you made to speak with Ethan's teacher. You said there had been a misunderstanding you wanted to clear up. An awkward silence descended on the room. My parents looked confused, while Miranda's complexion paled, then flushed. I was just checking in, she said tightly. As family. By suggesting his home environment might be problematic, Richard pressed something unfamiliar in his tone. Determination, perhaps, or the beginnings of rebellion. Richard, this isn't the time, Miranda hissed. My mother jumped in. Let's check on dinner, shall we? It must be nearly ready. The meal itself was a masterclass in passive aggression. Miranda had apparently brought special food for her children, organic specially prepared dishes that she made a show of serving them, while loudly explaining why the regular Thanksgiving fare might not be suitable. Tyler and Sophia, taking their cues from their mother, made exaggerated faces at the traditional dishes. Mom's green bean casserole looks weird, Sophia announced, poking at the dish my mother had made the same way for 30 years. Honey, we talked about this, Miranda said, not bothering to lower her voice. Not everyone has access to the quality ingredients we're used to. We need to be understanding. My mother's face fell. The casserole was her signature dish, one she'd always taken particular pride in. Something shifted in the atmosphere when Richard unexpectedly served himself a large portion of the maligned green beans. This looks delicious, Diane. Your holiday meals were always my favorite part of joining the family. Miranda stared at her husband in disbelief as he took a bite and complimented the dish enthusiastically. My father, after a moment's hesitation, agreed that the casserole was indeed excellent as always. The twins looked confused by this departure from the expected script. Tyler, attempting to realign with what he thought was still the plan, pointed at Ethan's plate. At least Ethan gets real food today, not just water. A hush fell over the table. The reference to the infamous dinner incident hung in the air like a thundercloud. What does that mean, Tyler? My father asked, his fork paused midway to his mouth. Before Tyler could respond, Miranda intervened. Nothing, Dad. Kids say the silliest things. No, I want to know what Tyler meant, my father insisted, looking between Miranda and the children with growing suspicion. Tyler, misreading the situation, continued proudly. Mom said last time Ethan came over he was an extra, so he just got water while we had lobster. She said people who can't afford their own food shouldn't expect. That's enough, Tyler, Miranda snapped, her composed facade cracking. Is this true? My mother asked, turning to me. Miranda refused to feed Ethan. Before I could answer, Richard spoke up. Yes, it's true. I was there. Miranda served Ethan water and plain pasta while everyone else had lobster. She called him an extra. The room fell silent again, but this silence was different, heavier, charged with the weight of truth finally spoken aloud. I'm sure there was a misunderstanding, my father began weakly. There was no misunderstanding, Richard continued firmly. And it wasn't an isolated incident. Miranda has been actively trying to undermine Samantha and David's family for months, making false reports to child services, interfering with David's job prospects, spreading rumors about their financial situation. Miranda's face contorted with rage. How dare you? After everything I've done for this family, what exactly have you done, Miranda? I asked quietly. Besides, create division and hurt an innocent child. I've been successful, she nearly shouted. I've given Mom and Dad something to be proud of. I've maintained standards while you've wallowed in mediocrity. Miranda, my mother gasped. It's true, Miranda continued, her carefully constructed image disintegrating with each word. You've always been the disappointment, Samantha. The teacher with the modest house and the struggling husband. I have everything. The mansion, the successful husband, the perfect children. I won, and you still won't acknowledge it. The raw jealousy in her voice was stunning. For years I'd believed Miranda looked down on my life choices from a position of genuine contentment with her own. The truth was far sadder. She'd been measuring herself against me all along, desperate to prove her superiority. Winning implies competition, I said softly. I never saw us as competitors, Miranda. Just sisters. Liar, you've always been jealous of me. I think Richard said with surprising gentleness, you might be projecting your own feelings onto your sister. Miranda turned on him, eyes blazing. Whose side are you on? The side of truth, he replied simply. And our family's mental health. This has gone too far, Miranda. My parents sat in stunned silence, looking between their daughters as if seeing us clearly for the first time. My father's face had aged a decade in minutes, while my mother's eyes brimmed with tears of dawning comprehension. All these years, she whispered. We enabled this, didn't we? No one needed to answer. The truth hung in the air, undeniable now that it had been spoken aloud. Miranda stood abruptly, her chair scraping harshly against the floor. I won't sit here and be attacked on Thanksgiving. Children were leaving. Actually, Richard said, not moving from his seat. I think the children and I will stay. You might need some time alone to reflect. It was the first time I'd ever seen someone directly contradict Miranda without consequence. The shock of it seemed to steal her breath. Fine, she finally managed, gathering her purse with trembling hands. Enjoy your mediocre meal with my mediocre sister. As the front door slammed behind her, an extraordinary thing happened. My father reached across the table and took my hand. Samantha, he said, his voice unsteady. I think we owe you an apology, a long overdue one. The conversation that followed was painful but necessary. Decades of favoritism, acknowledged patterns, of enabling recognized. The slow poison of family dysfunction finally named. Through tears and halting words, the first tentative steps toward healing began. When we left my parents' house that evening, something fundamental had shifted. The truth had finally emerged, not through my efforts to expose Miranda, but through the natural consequences of her own escalating behavior. The facade had cracked, revealing the insecurity and resentment that had driven her actions all along. What happens now? David asked, as we drove home, Ethan sleeping peacefully in the back seat. I don't know, I admitted. But whatever it is, we'll face it together. The week following Thanksgiving passed in a strange calm. Miranda had gone completely silent. No calls, no texts, no reports from Lauren about workplace machinations. It was like the eye of a hurricane. Peaceful but ominous, with the certainty of more turbulence to come. My parents called daily, sometimes just to check in, other times to continue the difficult conversations we'd begun on Thanksgiving. Decades of family dynamics couldn't be resolved in a matter of days, but their willingness to acknowledge the problems felt like a miracle in itself. We should have questioned things long ago, my mother said during one call. The way she talked about you, the things she claimed you'd said or done. None of it matched the daughter we knew, but we accepted it because it was easier than considering the alternative, which was, I prompted, that we'd created this situation, she admitted quietly. That our favoritism had shaped Miranda into someone who needed to tear you down to feel secure in her position. Richard called too, keeping us updated on Miranda's state of mind. She's alternating between rage and strategic planning, he reported. One minute she's throwing things, the next she's calmly making lists of ways to repair her reputation with the family. Is she acknowledging any wrongdoing? David asked. None, Richard sighed. In her version of events, she's the victim of a coordinated attack by jealous people who misunderstood her good intentions. I wasn't surprised. Miranda had spent a lifetime avoiding accountability for her actions. Real change would require a level of self-reflection she'd never demonstrated. What did surprise me was the call from my father on Wednesday evening. "Miranda wants to come to your house tomorrow to talk," he said without preamble. "To clear the air," she says. At our house, I repeated, alarm bells ringing. That seems unexpected. "Your mother and I think it might be good for you two to talk directly. We'd come as well to mediate." I covered the phone and relayed the conversation to David, whose immediate headshake was emphatic. "Dad, I don't think that's a good idea right now," I said carefully. "Things are still very raw." "She seems genuinely remorseful, Samantha," he insisted. "Everyone deserves a chance to make amends." After further discussion, I reluctantly agreed to the meeting, but with conditions. It would take place on Saturday afternoon when David would be home and Richard would accompany Miranda to ensure things remained civil. "That seems reasonable," my father conceded. "We'll see you Saturday at 2. As soon as the call ended, I texted our alliance group Miranda requesting meeting at our house Saturday. Parents and Richard coming too. Advice. The responses were immediate and unanimous. Document everything. Jessica suggested recording the conversation legal in our state with one-party consent. Marcus recommended having prepared statements to keep the discussion on track. Alicia offered to take Ethan for the afternoon. "This feels like a setup," David said as we prepared for bed. "Miranda never voluntarily puts herself in a position to be held accountable." I know, I agreed. But refusing would make me look uncooperative to my parents, who genuinely seem to think this could help. "Just promise me you'll stay calm no matter what she says or does." That's exactly what she'll be trying to provoke. An emotional reaction she can use to prove you're unstable. "I promise," I said, though uncertainty churned in my stomach. Years of conditioning had taught me to doubt myself in confrontations with Miranda. This would be the ultimate test of how far I'd come. Saturday arrived with a sense of foreboding. We sent Ethan off with Alicia for an afternoon of movies and ice cream, not wanting him to witness whatever was about to unfold. David set up a discreet recording device in the living room while I prepared a simple spread of coffee, tea, and store-bought cookies. Nothing elaborate that Miranda could criticize, nothing so sparse that she could claim inhospitality. "Remember," David said as the clock approached 2, "we have the truth on our side. And this time we're on our home turf." My parents arrived first looking nervous but determined. My mother hugged me tightly, a gesture so unexpected it momentarily stole my breath. "We're here for both of you," she whispered. "Not just Miranda. Not anymore." 20 minutes later, with still no sign of Miranda or Richard, my father called to check on their whereabouts. "Richard says she's insisting on coming alone," he reported with concern. "He's trying to convince her to stick to the plan." Another 10 minutes passed before a car door slammed outside. Through the front window, I watched Miranda march up our walkway alone, her posture rigid with contained fury. No Richard in sight. When I opened the door, Miranda brushed past me without greeting, scanning our modest living room with calculated disdain. "Quaint," she remarked, the familiar judgment in her tone. "Just like I remembered." "Miranda," my father said sharply, "we agreed you'd be respectful." She waved a dismissive hand. "I'm being honest, Dad. Isn't that what everyone wants, honesty?" The tension in the room was palpable as we all took seats. My parents on the love seat, David and I on the couch, Miranda claiming the armchair like a throne. "Well," she began with artificial brightness here, "we all are. One big happy family." "Miranda," my mother said quietly, "you wanted this meeting to clear the air. Perhaps you should start." "Of course." She straightened, assuming an expression of practiced sincerity. "I want to express my concern about how things have deteriorated between us, Samantha. I've only ever wanted the best for you and your family, but my efforts to help have been consistently misinterpreted." David shifted beside me but remained silent as we'd agreed. "Your efforts to help? Included calling child services with false allegations, I asked calmly. I was concerned about Ethan's welfare given your obvious financial struggles, she replied smoothly. Any loving aunt would do the same. And interfering with David's job prospects, spreading rumors about my competence at school, having us followed? Miranda's eyes narrowed. You're proving my point about your paranoia, Samantha. These conspiracy theories are exactly why I'm worried. They're not theories, I replied, retrieving a folder from the side table. We have documentation of everything. Emails, recorded phone calls, witness statements, including from Richard. Richard has no idea what he's talking about, Miranda snapped the first crack in her composed facade. He's been under tremendous stress. Miranda, my father interjected, we saw your behavior firsthand at Thanksgiving, and we've spoken with Richard extensively since then. She turned to our parents, eyes widening with betrayal. You've been talking to Richard behind my back. About me. We're trying to understand what's happening with our daughter, my mother said firmly. I'm your daughter too. Miranda's voice rose. The successful one. The one who's given you everything you wanted. We wanted happy, well-adjusted children, my father replied sadly. Not this competition you've created. Miranda's face contorted with rage. There is no competition, I've already won. I have everything Samantha doesn't. Money, status, a real career? Yet here you are, David observed quietly in our home, furious that we're happy despite having less. The simple statement hit Miranda like a physical blow. She stared at David momentarily speechless, before recovering her composure with visible effort. I came here to offer an olive branch, she said, her voice dangerously controlled. To suggest we put this unpleasantness behind us. But clearly you're determined to maintain this victim narrative. What exactly are you offering, Miranda? I asked. Because it sounds like you want us to ignore months of deliberate sabotage and pretend everything's fine. I want you to stop poisoning our parents against me, she shouted, mask slipping completely now. Stop turning Richard against me. Stop acting like your pathetic little life is somehow better than everything I've built. We haven't done any of those things, I said steadily. You're facing the natural consequences of your own actions. Consequences, she laughed bitterly. You have no idea what consequences are. But you will. The threat hung in the air between us. Is that why you really came here today? David asked. To threaten us? Miranda stood abruptly. I came to give you a chance to end this amicably. Instead, you've made your choice. Now I'll make mine. Which is what exactly I asked, remaining seated despite the instinct to rise to her level. I have resources you can't imagine, she said coldly. Connections influence money. If you continue this campaign against me, I'll use every tool at my disposal to crush you. My father stood now too, his face flushed with anger. Miranda, that's enough. She whirled on him. Stay out of this, Dad. You've made it clear whose side you're on. We're not on sides, my mother protested. We're trying to heal our family. There's no healing this, Miranda spat. Samantha has always been jealous of me, always played the victim while undermining me at every turn. And now she's turned you all against me too. No one's turned against you, I said quietly. We just stopped enabling behavior that hurts others. You think you're so perfect, don't you, Miranda? Sneered the dedicated teacher, the loving mother, the long-suffering sister. It makes me sick. I'm not perfect, I replied. I've made plenty of mistakes. The difference is I can admit them. Save your sanctimonious garbage for your classroom kids, she snapped before turning to our parents. And you two, after everything I've done for you, the vacations, the gifts, the financial support, this is how you repay me. My parents exchanged a confused glance. Financial support, my father repeated. Miranda, we've never taken money from you. A strange expression flickered across Miranda's face, panic quickly masked by indignation. Of course you have. Who do you think has been supplementing your retirement fund, paying off your mortgage? The confusion on my parents' faces deepened. Richard handles our financial gifts, my mother said slowly. He insisted on setting up those arrangements himself, Richard Miranda repeated flatly. My husband has been giving you money without my knowledge. The implications of this revelation registered simultaneously for everyone in the room. Richard had been secretly supporting my parents, not Miranda. His earlier comments about her financial deception suddenly made perfect sense. I think my father said carefully there's been some misunderstanding about family finances. Miranda's face had gone deathly pale. This isn't happening, she whispered more to herself than anyone else. This isn't happening. With sudden violence, she snatched up her purse and strode toward the door. This family is dead to me, she announced. All of you. Dead. The door slammed behind her with such force that a framed photo fell from the wall and shattered on the floor. The silence that followed was absolute. Well, David finally said that went about as expected. My mother buried her face in her hands. How did we not see this for so many years? How could we have been so blind? I moved to sit beside her, taking her trembling hands in mine. Because Miranda is very good at what she does. And because it's human nature to believe what we want to believe. My father looked years older as he stared at the broken picture frame. What happens now? I don't know, I admitted. But whatever it is, we'll face it together. As a real family should. As if on cue, the front door opened and Richard stepped in looking grim but determined. I passed Miranda on the road, he said without preamble. She was upset. That's putting it mildly, David replied. Richard nodded, taking in the tense atmosphere. I should have been here. I'm sorry. Why weren't you? I asked. She locked me out of the house this morning when I insisted on accompanying her. By the time I found my spare key, she was already gone. He sighed heavily. But that's not why I'm here now. There's something you all need to know. We gathered in the kitchen as Richard explained the reality of their financial situation. The mounting debt, the failed investments, the precarious state of his company. Miranda's been living beyond our means for years, he said. The house is mortgaged 3 times over. The cars are leased. The children's private school tuition is months behind. But she's always so generous with gifts, my mother protested weakly. Credit cards, Richard replied simply. Maxed out. All of them. Why are you telling us this? My father asked. Because I'm filing for separation on Monday, Richard said, his voice steady despite the pain in his eyes. And Miranda's likely to lash out when that happens. You should be prepared. As Richard shared his plans for disentangling himself from Miranda's web of financial deception, I felt a strange mixture of vindication and sadness. The facade Miranda had maintained for so long was crumbling, entirely revealing the insecurity and desperation beneath. There would be more confrontations to come, more pain to work through. But something fundamental had shifted. The truth was finally in the open, impossible to ignore or rebury. And in that truth lay the possibility of genuine healing, not just for me, but perhaps eventually for Miranda as well. 6 months after the confrontation in our living room, summer sunshine streamed through the windows of our newly painted kitchen. The house was filled with the mingled aromas of grilling chicken, fresh baked bread, and the blueberry pie cooling on the counter. Voices and laughter drifted in from the backyard where David was showing my father how to properly season the new grill, a belated Father's Day gift we'd given him last weekend. Need any help with those potatoes? My mother asked, entering the kitchen with an empty lemonade pitcher. Almost done, I replied, adding a final sprinkle of fresh herbs to the bowl of roasted potato salad. How's Ethan doing with the badminton setup? Richard's helping him. Those two have become quite the team. She smiled, the expression coming more naturally to her these days. It's nice to see. I nodded in agreement. The past 6 months had transformed our family in ways I could never have predicted. After Richard filed for separation, the carefully constructed illusion of Miranda's perfect life had collapsed spectacularly. Financial records revealed during the proceedings showed the true extent of their debt, while character witnesses, including several former friends and colleagues Miranda had alienated, painted a clear picture of the manipulation that had characterized their relationship. My parents, confronted with irrefutable evidence of Miranda's deception, had gone through their own painful reckoning. Years of enabling behavior and willful blindness couldn't be erased overnight, but they'd committed to the difficult work of rebuilding our family on healthier foundations. "She called again yesterday," my mother said quietly, refilling the pitcher from the refrigerator water dispenser. I paused in my food preparation. "What did she say?" "The usual. That we've abandoned her. That we've chosen you over her." She sighed, adding lemon slices to the water. I tried explaining again that this isn't about choosing sides. It's about acknowledging truth and setting boundaries. How did she respond? She hung up. But she called back an hour later asking if she could see the twins next weekend during her visitation. A small smile touched my mother's lips. "That's progress, I think. Last month she would have demanded, not asked." The custody arrangement between Miranda and Richard had been one of the most contentious aspects of their separation. Initially, Miranda had insisted on full custody despite her unstable financial situation. When the judge awarded Richard primary custody with Miranda having supervised visitation, she'd been devastated. Another blow to the perfect image she'd cultivated for so long. "How are Tyler and Sophia adjusting?" I asked, carrying the potato salad toward the back door. "Better than expected. Richard's been very careful not to speak negatively about Miranda in front of them. And that therapist they're seeing, Dr. Brennan, she's apparently wonderful with children from high-conflict divorces." The screen door swung open as Ethan burst in, his cheeks flushed with excitement. "Mom, Grandpa says he's going to teach me to fish next weekend at the lake house." "That sounds wonderful, honey," I smiled, ruffling his hair as he grabbed a cookie from the jar on the counter. "Not too many of those before dinner." "I'll save room, promise," he called over his shoulder, already racing back outside. My mother watched him go with a soft expression. "He's thriving, Samantha. You and David have done an amazing job, especially considering everything you've been through." "He's resilient," I replied. "Children often are when they feel secure in their family's love." The statement hung between us for a moment, heavy with unspoken implications about the environment Miranda's children had grown up in, and that I had experienced as a child myself. "I'm so sorry," my mother said suddenly, her eyes filling with tears. "For all those years of not seeing, not protecting you from her behavior." I set down the bowl and embraced her. "We're healing now. That's what matters." And it was true. The healing process had been painful but necessary. My parents had begun therapy both individually and as a couple, working to understand how their parenting had contributed to the dysfunction in our family. They'd made genuine efforts to connect with Ethan, to support David's new career path, and to be present in our lives in healthy, respectful ways. Richard had undergone his own transformation. Freed from Miranda's constant demands and manipulation, he'd become more engaged with his children and had begun rebuilding his company on more ethical foundations. The twins, initially parroting their mother's entitled attitudes, were slowly learning different values under their father's steadier guidance. Our alliance had evolved too. Jessica was now a regular part of family gatherings, her warmth and humor bringing a lightness we'd often lacked. Marcus had become a valued business contact for David, their professional relationship deepening into friendship. Alicia remained my closest colleague at school, her unwavering support during the difficult months a testament to true friendship. As for Miranda herself, the changes were slower, more uncertain. The exposure of her financial deception had stripped away much of her social standing. Many former friends had distanced themselves once the truth emerged about how she'd treated her family. Her carefully curated image of success and superiority had crumbled, forcing her to confront realities she'd spent a lifetime avoiding. There had been dark moments. A particularly concerning incident 3 months ago had resulted in a brief hospitalization and a diagnosis of narcissistic personality disorder with recommendation for intensive therapy. Miranda had initially rejected the diagnosis, but Richard's insistence that treatment was a condition of increased visitation with the twins had eventually persuaded her to try. Her progress was tentative, marked by setbacks and resistance. The therapist had warned us all that real change would take time if it happened at all. People with deeply ingrained patterns of narcissistic behavior rarely achieved complete transformation. But small shifts were possible, and for the sake of Tyler and Sophia, we all hoped for those small shifts. "Food's ready," David called from the backyard, interrupting my reflections. We gathered around the picnic table David had built last month. My parents, Richard, the twins, Ethan, and us. The conversation flowed easily, punctuated by laughter and the occasional gentle ribbing. Tyler and Sophia, stripped of their mother's constant pressure to perform, were showing glimpses of the normal children they might have been all along. "This is delicious," Samantha, Richard said, helping himself to seconds of the potato salad. "I'd ask for the recipe, but I'd probably ruin it." "I could teach you," I offered. "It's not complicated." "Dad can't even make toast without burning it." Sophia giggled, the sound refreshingly childlike. "That's not true," Richard protested good-naturedly. "I've mastered cereal and milk." "A culinary achievement indeed," my father chuckled. As the meal progressed, I found myself observing the scene with a sense of quiet wonder. This gathering, relaxed, genuine, filled with mutual respect, was what family should be. Not perfect, not without its complications, but fundamentally grounded in love rather than competition or control. After dessert, as the evening lights softened into dusk, Ethan and the twins organized an impromptu talent show on the patio. Their youthful energy and uncomplicated joy brought smiles to all the adult faces watching. "They're going to be okay, aren't they?" David murmured, his arm around my shoulders. "I think so," I replied. "All of them." Later, after our guests had departed and Ethan was tucked into bed, David and I sat on the back porch swing, enjoying the peaceful end to a satisfying day. "I was thinking about that dinner at Miranda's," David said quietly. "The one where all this really started. The 'we don't feed extras' incident." I nodded, the memory no longer carrying the same sting it once had. It's strange how something so cruel ultimately led to something so healing. If Miranda hadn't been so openly callous that night, we might have continued the pattern indefinitely. Sometimes it takes a moment of absolute clarity to break unhealthy cycles, I agreed. Though I could have done without all the drama that followed. David chuckled, pulling me closer. "No one would accuse our family of being boring, that's for sure." "Speaking of family," I said, "my parents mentioned wanting to take Ethan camping next month. Just the three of them. How do you feel about that?" I considered the question honestly. Good, actually. They're really trying to build their own relationship with him separate from their relationship with us. That's healthy. "And Miranda? Any update on when she might join a family gathering?" "Not yet. Her therapist says she's still working through her anger and sense of betrayal. But she managed an entire visitation with the twins last weekend without making disparaging comments about Richard, so that's something." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the evening sounds of our neighborhood. Distant children's voices, the occasional car, the gentle rustling of leaves in the summer breeze. "You know," David said finally, "I'm proud of us. Not just for getting through the crisis, but for how we got through it. We didn't sink to Miranda's level. We protected our family without becoming vindictive." "That was important to me," I admitted. "I never wanted revenge, just protection and eventually healing." "That's why you won in the only competition that ever really mattered." I turned to look at him questioningly. "The competition to build a life of genuine meaning and connection," he explained. "Miranda focused so much on appearances and possessions that she missed what truly matters. You never did." His words warmed me from within. "We won," I corrected gently. "Together." As we rocked slowly in the gathering darkness, I reflected on the journey of the past year. From that horrible moment in Miranda's kitchen when she dismissed my son as an extra to this peaceful evening surrounded by the love of authentic family, both born and chosen. The path had been painful, filled with confrontations and revelations I would never have willingly sought. but the destination was worth every difficult step. We had broken free from toxic patterns that had poisoned our family for generations. We had created space for honesty, accountability, and genuine connection. And in that space, true healing had finally begun to flourish. Not just for me, but for everyone touched by the ripples of change. What's the most hurtful thing a family member has ever said to you, and how did you handle it? Share your story in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell if you enjoyed this video. Your support means everything to me, and I'm grateful for this amazing community where we can share our stories of resilience and healing. Remember, sometimes the families we choose are as important as the ones we're born into. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next video.